Here we go. Well, thank you everyone so much for your time. Again, as folks come in, we're still going to admit them, but we're going to get rolling with this. And it means so much to us that you've taken time on your Friday to sit down with Shelley and I and discuss a topic that is near and dear to our hearts. And I know a lot of you have perhaps already worked with this topic, which is understanding psilocybin. So you've already perhaps sat with medicine or worked with a micro or macro dose already, so you understand the aspects of it. But Shelley and I both feel that it's important to talk about safety behind this. We realize that this is a new frontier as psychedelics start to come online and to be used in different types of therapy, that there are some subtle things that we feel are important to bring up about this topic. There is no real governing body around psilocybin yet. It's being understood, and there's a lot of ongoing trials about that, and we'll dive into that with our topic today. But more than anything, we wanted to bring a group together of like minds. And also on this call today, what's so beautiful is that we have physicians, we have attorneys, we have researchers, we have individuals that are just very curious about all of this type of work. We have nurses and therapists, and the more that we can gather together and talk about this and our understanding of it, I feel it's going to help with some of this revolution that's taking place with this movement. I feel it's important to also add that while Shelley and I have both been working in this field collectively for 14 years, but individually about 7 years each, we're not here to say that we have all the answers. I think that is would be more on the egoic side to say, hey, this is the way to do it. The truth is that we're discovering this stuff, but as we discover more information around it, we're able to put words to it to be able to share it with masses. The number one thing that I feel, and I think Shelley would agree with too, is we want to make sure people are safe with this. Because it is vastly misunderstood. We also want to look at efficacy of this, both short-term and long-term. For me personally, and I believe for Shelley too, it's maintaining a level of sacredness around it and respect towards it. Because sometimes this stuff can get into public eye, and then sort of if you observe what happened in the marijuana movement, it just starts snowballing very quickly, and there's not a whole lot of regulation around it. I mean, it's better now, but what we'd like to do is, bring up some of this stuff today in our talk, and as stuff comes up, you can ask questions. Although there will be a question area at the end of this. Of course, if you have to leave a little bit early, we thank you for being here and listening to all of this. And there is another gentleman on this call right now that has been very influential in this work, and I'm just going to bring his name up. His name is Daniel Covington. He has been helping to lead the way up in Oregon and Washington around this particular type of therapy. So please feel free to share information with each other. I'd love to maybe gather your emails if you're okay with that. If you want to type that in at the bottom, and we can just put a little group chat together if you feel comfortable with that, but certainly no pressure. I'm going to dive into our PowerPoint today, and we have a PowerPoint, a video, and then we have a couple other things if you're interested. But let's go ahead, and I think I can all screen share this. Oh, and before I do this, I want to make sure I can also share sound. There we go. Okay. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. Great. Let's put this on, and let's go to the very top. All right. And before I dive too far in, Shelley, would you like to add anything over what I said?
Oh, no, I'm just excited to share this topic. We are so passionate, but have a personal relationship with this therapy and how much it's changed our lives. So really sharing from our hearts and wanting to just spread this as much as we can and raise the vibration, raise the education around this. We really feel there can't be enough education around this topic. So we really wanted to create a special place today so you guys can then continue to share this work with the people you know. So thank you for being here.
Yeah. So let's dive right into it. These are the main topics we're going to cover today. What is psilocybin, the therapeutic benefits of it, diagnosis that we have seen, Shelley and I have seen in our work that this particular therapy works most effective with, looking at patient-client selection, medication titration, microdosing versus macrodosing, and how to do that safely, and looking what that might look like. Talking about set and setting, some questions, and there's some supplemental stuff afterwards, because the truth is there's quite a bit of studies. As of 2022, there was over 60 studies ongoing by the NIH around this particular type of therapy. So looking forward to sharing more when more of that stuff comes up. But to get into this, what is psilocybin? Don't need to show a hand here, but I know a lot of you have probably heard this name or worked with this before. Obviously, you wouldn't be here, but want to dive into what psilocybin is from our understanding. Now, psilocybin is a chemical found within a certain species of mushrooms, and those mushrooms are listed there on the screen. It is known as a psychedelic. Now, the word psychedelic can be a very triggering word, and one of our works around this is changing the language. When people hear the word psychedelic or hallucinogen, a lot of the 60s and 70s images come up with the tie-dye and the colors, and that's all well and good, but that doesn't benefit us from a therapeutic standpoint. In fact, it doesn't say medicine all over it at all. And if we want to introduce this into medical professions eventually, then we need to change the language around that. And again, I'm going to bring up the name Daniel Covington. He's done an amazing job about putting new language to this type of work. And I think it's helpful to start grasping and understanding what exactly these words mean. So another word for psilocybin would be entheogen. But psychedelic, again, means mind manifesting, something that manifests within our minds. Now, in nature, what psilocybin is shown to do in these mushrooms is it tends to be an antibacterial, antimicrobial. It also tends to have a bit of an appetite suppression for insects. So that way, the insect doesn't eat the entirety of the plant, and the plant can continue to flourish. So it's suppressing the appetite. Mushrooms that contain psilocybin are known to create hallucinations and or mystical experiences. Now, there is a very big difference between a schizophrenic or a manic depressive hallucination and a hallucination that you might experience on psilocybin. In fact, I don't even really believe that they're the same thing. The typical experience that a lot of people have hallucination might be colors and shifts and changes, and then eventually, depending on how much the dosage is, you might begin to experience a little bit more verbal talk tracks taking place internally, or you may start to see some shapes, but it's something that's taking place internally, typically with the eyes closed. Now, again, it really comes down to how much you're ingesting and the types of mushrooms. There's over 203 species of psilocybin mushrooms. And to be considered to be a psilocybin mushroom, it needs to have anywhere between 0.5% and 2% psilocybin and found in nature. Now, I realize that mankind is getting our hands on it, and we're trying to do these hybrids, and we're trying to up the amount of psilocybin and all of that. Our belief and opinion around this is that the more natural, the better. Just because you have a high dose of psilocybin doesn't mean it's better. It's just going to be a different affect. The different in psilocybin also what we find is the range of experiences and effects are different as well. Some people experience a lot of calmness, some experience relaxation, others feel elevated focus, euphoria, or strong hallucinations. Others, it might bring up, some what we call purging, might bring up sadness or tears. It might bring up an old story that from a therapeutic standpoint, we see as a good thing. But for someone who's never really worked with the medicine before, they can go, oh my God, what is this? This is creeping me out. We'll talk about it in a little bit about set and setting, but just wanted to give you a little brief overview of what psilocybin is. the last part I would add is that, you know, psilocybin itself is not what the body uses. Psilocybin is broken down into what is called psilocin. Psilocin is very similar to serotonin and has a very similar effect. So when you do go on perhaps a journey or you're using small micro amounts of psilocybin, as it's broken down to psilocin, what it's doing is it's acting like serotonin and it's creating a bridge throughout the neurotransmitter, through the gap between the nerves and within the brain. We're going to pause right here and we're going to show you a brief video. If I can do this.
This is going to be based around the therapeutic benefits of psilocybin. We find most people, when they begin to get curious, they want to know, what is it that it could possibly help me with? Am I a good candidate, not a good candidate? So this video was something we created, just a short 3-minute little video that kind of highlights, obviously this is not all of the benefits in its entirety, but it's just some of the highlights that we've found that tend to help the majority of people.
Okay. Go. I think everyone can see my screen again, I hope. And we'll put this up here. I like to talk out loud to myself. All right. So Shelly actually made this video, and we'll talk, like she said, a little bit more about, she'll talk more about it at the end.
The world is a very different place than it was 10 years ago, and nowhere is that more evident than in healthcare. The global alternative medicine market was valued at $92 billion in 2021 and is expected to reach over $411 billion in 2030. Never in history have there been such a high number of consumers looking for alternative ways to feel better physically and mentally. Psilocybin has been used as medicine in indigenous communities for thousands of years. It is a tried and true method in these communities for healing and overall well-being. In the mid-20th century, psilocybin gained popularity in Western society. Over the last 10 years, numerous clinical trials have shown promising results for the use of psilocybin in treating a wide range of health conditions. In 2018, the FDA granted designated psilocybin therapy a breakthrough therapy. Through research, clinical trials, and citizen science, a number of benefits have become well known among the holistic community. Here are 10 benefits of psilocybin therapy. Support for depression. Clinical studies have shown that psilocybin can produce rapid and long-lasting improvements in mood and well-being in those struggling with anxiety. Support for PTSD. Psilocybin has shown potential as a treatment for symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder in early clinical trials. Improved sense of spiritual connection. Psilocybin can lead to a profound sense of spiritual connection by discovering a deeper meaning and purpose in life. Increased creativity. Psilocybin has been shown to increase creativity, problem-solving ability, and divergent thinking. Improved confidence. Psilocybin can lead to increased self-esteem and confidence in some individuals, which can support low self-esteem or body image issues. Decreased fear and anxiety. Psilocybin has been shown to decrease fear and anxiety and help individuals with phobias and social anxiety disorders. Support for chronic illness. Psilocybin has been shown to support and help manage chronic pain and chronic illness. Reduce substance abuse. Psilocybin has been shown to reduce dependence on alcohol and other substances. Reduction in fear of death. Psilocybin has been shown to increase acceptance of death and support those facing life-threatening illnesses. Improved relationships. Psilocybin can lead to improved relationships with loved ones by helping increase empathy and understanding towards others. In a world of uncertainty, psilocybin demonstrates hope in the field of alternative medicine and healthcare. Our hope is for this therapy to become more accessible for those in need. there can be a clearer, healthier, and happier tomorrow.
Awesome.
All right. I hope everyone is able to hear that, and I hope everyone is able to hear that. I'm going to pop us back into our PowerPoint again.
And I can say, David and I firsthand have seen all of these benefits that we highlighted in numerous of our clients over and over again. So it's definitely there's definitely a wide range of benefits, and they just keep showing themselves in each experience we have with all of our clients. So just wanted to go back through and break down these again. First, anxiety, depression. We find that's probably one of the number one things that people come to us for is just overall anxiety. And it seems, especially post-COVID, anxiety is just this a rampant need that people are looking for some sort of alternative aid in order to lower their anxiety. We found incredible benefits through all different dosages of using psilocybin. Post-traumatic stress disorder, we've worked and seen a lot of benefits with especially veterans and first responders. A lot of just incredible progress in reducing PTSD in all different dosages of psilocybin. Spiritual connection. There's this increasing awareness that we find as people work with this therapy, and this understanding of what is my purpose? What am I here for? What is it that's going to bring me fulfillment in life? And there's this beautiful way that this therapy can kind of give that mirror in front of you to really show you what is it that I'm here for, to kind of bring more peace to your life. Creativity. We find that this medicine tends to be really wonderful people that are in the creative field. So artists, musicians, writers tend to do really, really well with this. It tends to open up parts of our brains to expand creativity, but also to lessen our judgment around ourselves. So, lots of times in the creative industry, we tend to be hypercritical and live in that perfectionist world. And this kind of lessens that. So we're able to just express and create. Next, self-esteem and confidence in individuals. As we seeing people and ourselves firsthand as we work with this, again, it lowers that judgment of self, that voice that we get stuck in here inside our head constantly wanting to be so self-critical. And if we can silence that voice, there's this self-esteem and confidence that shows underneath there that, I really am a person that's supposed to be a part of this world. I really do have purpose, and I'm meant to go out and live this. Next, acceptance of death in individuals. We find this works really well for people that are facing life-threatening illnesses, to really accept death with less fear, with more just an understanding that's just part of the cycle of life. Death, birth, death, and all in between is just part of this path and journey that we're all in and we all share together. And to be able to face it with just a greater understanding removes a lot of those fears.
And I just want to add too on the PTSD thing, remembering post-traumatic stress disorder, it's not, oftentimes that's associated with military and civil service work, but it actually encompasses a lot more. It could be sexual abuse, it could be mental abuse, and we'll talk about patient selection in a little bit, but mental abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, whatever took place. It could be a car accident or a loss of a loved one, somebody perhaps that we may have cared about deeply. Are we admitting someone in?
Little person.
Oh, here. One second. There we go. And I'll touch on that just briefly, how that all works with some of this, in that psilocybin acts as a bit of a decoupler, and depending on the dosage as well as the preparation that an individual has prior to that, what it essentially does is we all can hear our thoughts on a regular basis because we are the closest person to our thoughts than anyone in the world. And what it allows us to do is, for a momentary amount of time, step away from that. We sometimes call that decoupling. I hear sometimes the word dissociative, although I'm not a huge fan of that word. I feel it becomes more of just being a witness. I can witness my mind without having to get caught up in the thoughts of my mind. I can become more observant of the mind rather than go along with the narrative and whatever my brain is telling me. We typically see that more on larger and larger doses, especially individuals that do a macro dose. However, those subtle effects can also be felt in smaller doses as well, too.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we already kind of covered this page. Gotcha. No, this was the second page. Gotcha. We kind of already touched on anxiety, but it helps a lot with any type of phobias, just social anxiety disorders. Again, if we're not so stuck in our thought loops and fixated on the things that we're fearful of, and those can silence and at least or lessen a little bit, then we're able to engage more in life and face the things that seemed overwhelming before. Next one, individuals with life-threatening illnesses, cancer, anxiety, depression, increasing spiritual connection. We kind of already talked about that, but I think this also is, we talk a lot about chronic pain, chronic illness, and I think this is a very powerful one. That's also the book that was shown here at the beginning by Mohan there, who's on our Zoom today. This wonderful book, but it was focused around chronic pain, and we do find so much benefit in numerous clients around this, and it's one that's near and dear to my heart. I suffered for a very long time with an autoimmune disease that became very overwhelming and near life-threatening. And I will say not necessarily that it healed my autoimmune disease, but it helped me manage the overwhelm and the emotions that was louder than anything else. And if I can manage the emotions around it where you're not so stuck, where you can't seem to even move forward, then you can create space to find answers and find ways to heal. So for me, it created space to be able to reach out and finally get help to move through the illness that I was working through. And I really, really attribute it to where I'm at now with my health, which is completely different. And I'm very vibrant now. So still on a path of healing, but very grateful. Next, dependence on alcohol, and I would say many other substances, any type of addictive disorder, because that comes in a desire to want to reach for the external, to find something to lean on, to trust in, to hide behind, instead of looking at self. And if we can look at ourselves and create a new sense of trust with self, then the desire to want to reach outside self for another substance lessens. So especially in larger doses and macro experiences, we do find an incredible decrease in any type of addictive disorder, even if that's, it could be food, it could be, alcohol, it could be pornography, it could be a number of ranges of things, smoking. We find definitely any type of those outward reaching for reliance on something outside of self decreases. And again, especially after macro sits, we find sometimes even a reduction of about 70% less in heavy alcohol drinking days. Next, improved relationships with loved ones. Many people have named this the marriage saver. So we see a lot of beautiful, especially couples or, any friends, sisters, or tend to do therapies together. Even if you don't do the therapy together and work with this type of medicine together, it does help you learn to lean in. It creates a deeper sense of empathy, a deeper sense of compassion, a deeper sense of just overall understanding and the other individual, and gets rid of that wall that's there that we put up to defend ourselves. And now I can lean in to go deeper with the people around me. Even if it's in a work situation, we find those relationships tend to get better as well.
Yeah, and I would add even on that too, that I'm sure everyone here at some point has gotten into some sort of entanglement with your partner or a loved one or a child or whomever it may be. Entanglement obviously argument or a disagreement or a frustration. We have 3 kids. Me as a stepdad, I feel the way we get to know each other is through vulnerability. I have to admit, it's a struggle sometimes understanding sometimes the mindset of a child, and even especially when it's not yours. However, what I have found that through a consistent microdose practice is that I've been able to be a lot more present with the children, and I'm able to go, okay, there's that thought. Where'd that thought come from? Why is that there? As opposed to immediately going into a reaction. I find that when we are taught, and again, it's all about guidance, when we're taught or consulted on how to do this the proper way, we learn, it's sort of like training wheels. We just learn how to work with it more appropriately. Because, we live in the South Bay here in Manhattan Beach, and I'm sure this is sort of how it is, I think, across the US, certainly in California. But the word microdose is a very loaded word. It's becoming more brought up in just regular conversations. But how it's being worked with is, I think, we'll talk about that in a moment, but how it's being worked with sometimes is actually doing less good than it could be doing good. And so when it pertains to things like relationships, I feel it is a value added benefit to be coached around in a relationship, how to work with a microdose or a macrodose appropriately.
And I really think we use this word a lot, space. It's about creating space in your life. So, we all have these old conditioned beliefs and thought patterns and thought loops that we've had that's probably been there since we were very small, that tend to filter and be a motor towards all of our decisions through our day-to-day. And to be able to create space where we're able to watch our reaction to things and maybe create a new pathway or a new choice, because now we're not so reactive. And so it creates this patience with the people around us, with our children, with our loved ones, with whoever that may be. Now we're able to look at that relationship in a different way. So patience is really an incredible benefit. Lastly, I know we already touched on acceptance of death, so we'll kind of skip over that one. But
yeah, so this particular slide in general is for the clinicians out there. And again, I'll mention this word again, citizen science, but we're using a little bit of citizen science around this because there isn't a whole lot of guidance that's out there yet, although there is a bunch of guidance that is coming down the pipe. In fact, up in Oregon, they have legalized this for licensed clinicians. And for those of us that are interested in that, you can check out some of their information, and I will certainly put some of this stuff on an email list too for anybody that puts their email down, and I can send that over to you. But let's just talk briefly about patient selection for this. PTSD candidates: physical, emotional, verbal, sexual, mental trauma. These are good candidates. Now, I understand within that, though, there are also a lot of subdiagnoses and other things that go along with that, too. So that does need to be weeded out a little bit more. We live in an allopathic medicine world, where it's predominantly dominated by Western medicine at this point. It's nice to see how this is slowly seeping its way in. But I know that there are many folks that are quick to immediately put someone on an SSRI or an antidepressant, and even before there's talk therapy and things like that. I think that it's important first, let's practice a little bit of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, see what's going on. And then from there, if the emotion is stabilized, if their life is somewhat stabilized, depending on how long they've been on that medication, well, the goal isn't to keep someone on medication forever. 1 second, we're going to admit someone here. Let me click up here. They're going to have to just wait, I guess.
there you go.
There we go. But it really, these are sort of the top priority: PTSD, anxiety, someone who's anxious all the time, it's been diagnosed as anxious, has sometimes a difficult time verbalizing that anxiety, depression, alcoholism, individuals that may be struggling with smoking or addictiveness. Now, again, I think we have to be a little bit careful with that too, because there are what is called spiritual bypassing, where we just sort of jump from one thing
Were
to
you going to put it on your screen?
uh,
Put it right in here. Take that off.
hold on. Can you put it on mute, please?
Can you hear?
So
They can't hear us.
we can hear you.
Everybody's muted. He said you can hear you. Oh,
I gotcha. I think everybody's good now. Oh, here we go.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
The chronic pain field, fibromyalgia. If you're not familiar with fibromyalgia is, it's sort of just a nerve pain that goes all over the body. It's very difficult to diagnose. A lot of times, from my understanding, it's treated with some opiates. Sometimes it's Cymbalta and a few other things. Shingles, complex regional pain without damage to the area. So it's just sort of an ache and a pain that's consistent there, that's chronic. Chronic by definition is anything that lasts over 6 weeks that doesn't go away. Chronic migraines and headaches.
Now, I will say, just to touch on really quick, since again, this is something that's near and dear to my heart around chronic pain. It's not necessarily like typical allopathic medicine where you take medicine and it silences the pain. This is more about looking at the root. What is the emotion? What is the old trauma? Or what is it that's, maybe it's even a genetic wiring that we're connected to, it's passed on generationally. It's something we need to look at. So it really helps us break it down to the root of it, as opposed to just cover up the symptoms that we're feeling of pain.
Clients that are on Adderall, high doses of Adderall, Zoloft, Wellbutrin, Lexapro, gabapentin, SSRIs and antidepressants, opiates, erectile dysfunction medications. There is a huge piece of psychology that I find is often missed within this. And then going back to the chronic pain piece, I had the opportunity to work at Cedars-Sinai for many years, selling spinal cord stimulators in the pain management realm. And they have a very good pain psychology department there, where there is a psychology on staff, and the psychologist sees every patient and works with the patient. So that way the patient feels like their hand is held. One of the things that one of the doctors there said was that about 90% of pain in the body is manifested by the brain. There is the obvious area or site where it's located, where the pain is. However, there's also a thought cycle that triggers that pain, sometimes more than others. There is other habits that go around that as well too. When we're depressed, when we are depressed, the body is tense. When we're anxious, the body is tight. When these things start to happen, that means that the sympathetic fight or flight nervous system is turned on. What we're finding with the work around psilocybin is that subtly it starts to affect the amygdala, which is where our fear response is. And it also seems to affect our parasympathetic nervous system, where we start to move into a rest and digest, where we can go, okay, the pain is there, but I know that I'm not the pain. I can see that this feeling or emotion is there, but I know that I'm not the feeling or emotion. There becomes a separation between it. And with practice, like anything else, it's a muscle that we have to build up around this. With practice, that can slowly start to, I feel, go away. And the last part is an open mind. This should never be, we don't ever try to convince people that this is the right therapy for them. I feel it really takes an open mind and a seeker to want to look outside the box. When I taught at USC, one of the things that I taught consistently was there's a fixed mindset and there's an open mindset. Which box do we fall in? Fixed mindset, meaning, are we going to be closed down, shut off, and completely, nope, 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 because it's very difficult to heal when we're moving from that space of, this isn't the right therapy, or this isn't going to work, or this, that, or the other, versus an open mind says, okay, maybe there's some possibility here that will allow me to be able to see what's really going on. Pardon us here as we admit another person in. Let's move this down here. So the next part is medication titration. A lot of folks will come to us and say, can I get off my medications?
Mm-hmm.
And we're not doctors, again, citizen science. The collection, and that is the collection analysis of data relating to the natural world by members of the general public, typically as part of a collaborative project with professional scientists. The good part is that we do work with researchers, and we do work with scientists, microbiologists,
and we do have clients
neurologists.
work with their physicians. So it ends up being a kind of teamwork effort in order to help titrate.
Mm-hmm. But the one thing that we do not want is a patient to go off their medicine right away,
Mm-hmm.
their medications right away. Because what ends up happening is that a patient gets used to that medication, their body gets accustomed to it, and then when that's taken away, there tends to be a bit of what's called a withdrawal symptom. And withdrawal symptoms, we can start to experience headaches, we can start to experience nervousness, anxiety. Sometimes some people report like zapping of the brain. There's a number of different side effects of just going off medication. It also depends on the level of medication that a person is on. If you're on, for instance, 200 milligrams of Zoloft, it's going to take most likely 3 to 4 months to slowly work your way off of that. It's not just an overnight thing. And so individuals in the future, when this is going to be more of a prescribed thing, it is maintaining some sort of medical continuum of, hey, let's go slow here and check in. In fact, let's go a little bit deeper. Let's keep journals on how you're doing day to day as you titrate off and add this into your practice.
And typically we find that it happens kind of organically. We don't ever want to change too many things at once because then you don't know which thing is helping. So if we start in a very slow process to where they start feeling motivated, you know what, I feel like I'm ready to start looking at possibly lowering my medication and talking to my physician and talking to whatever support facilitator you have, that they tend to then feel motivated themselves and know when that's correct and right.
Part of this also is learning to work with the medicine. Now, Shelley and I use the word medicine versus drugs,
yeah.
Or, we'll sometimes call it a supplement as well too,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a plant medicine. It's a plant medicine that's been used for many, many years before any of us have been alive. It's been used for thousands and thousands of years. So again, getting the right vocabulary and language around it's important. But it's a relationship. Unlike a synthetic that has not a lot of life force with it, mushrooms are in its own entity a life force. It is something that is billions of years old. It knows how to survive. And what we've found through the observance of nature is that it has a number of adaptable reflexes to it. Now, again, you're building a relationship with this, which means that you're going to check in with it. You're going to work with it. You're going to see how your body feels. You're going to journal a little bit about it. You're going to set intentions around it. You're going to get clear with different areas in your life. And the thing is when we build that muscle up repetitively over and over and over again, we slowly get stronger and stronger. And we start to develop new pathways. Now, I think it was Michael Pollan. He parroted this. It wasn't his saying. I believe it was a Swedish scientist saying, but I'm forgetting the name right now. But look at it as if there's a brand new snowfall, and you go down a hill on a sled, and then you go down that hill over again and over and over again. Well, over time, you just start making a route in the snow if you do it enough times. And that's how human conditioning and behavior is. It's just that we get stuck over and over and over again, going down that same route, one after another, day after day after day, conditioning after conditioning after conditioning. What we feel that this work does in the psychedelics is that it's like a brand new snowfall. And it helps you see that, okay, that path that was once there, it's covered up now, and I don't have to choose that path anymore. But at the end of the day, also, it's all about choice. And we can't make choices for anybody else. Those choices are dependent upon, our own self-work. I'm responsible, David's responsible for David, Shelley's responsible for Shelley. We choose to practice responsibility. And part of practicing that responsibility is practicing responsible medicine as well, too.
And just to clarify real quick, as we're talking about this topic of medication titration and all the examples we're giving, it's all based off of microdosing. And then we're going to get more into later the difference between microdosing and macrodosing. But this is a consistent small dose that they're taking daily in order, if their goal is to titrate their medications. So just to give some clarification around that.
Yeah, and also remembering that some individuals will feel this right away. Some people just have very sensitive bodies. I can say, for example, for me, my body's very sensitive. I know when this stuff is inside of it. I feel it pretty much on the dot when it starts to kick in. But others, it does take some time to slowly adapt and get used to it. Pardon us real quick. There's another one. So it does take some time. And a lot of people, it's like, oh, I haven't felt anything in the first day, or I haven't felt anything in the third day or the seventh day. Give it some time. And also make sure you're doing the work too, because again, this isn't a magic pill, or it's not a magic solution. I know they're called magic mushrooms. However, you're developing a relationship, and we have to learn to work with it in order for it to be effective. And whether it's working or it's a placebo, it's a win-win. Okay. Now there are some people that this is not the right therapy for. It's just not the right therapy for, and we have to honor that as well too. We don't give this, we want to try to weed out schizophrenics. We want to try to weed out bipolar 1 disorder that's still a current diagnosis if we can. However, I will say that we have seen some benefit around that. In fact, I believe that there is a lot of misdiagnosis out there around bipolar. However, that is up to the clinician and therapist to decide that. And, if you are having questions around that, feel free to reach out, and we can maybe help you with that a little bit. Because what we don't want is, or what we don't want to see, I think, in the medical community is that someone's on this medication or medicine, and all of a sudden they go into a manic episode and it becomes out of control.
And, also, and I know David mentioned kind of the placebo effect idea, and it's almost like we almost want it to be that, because that is showing that you had it within you the whole time. And I think really that's the goal of this type of therapy, is to show and to understand that we all have what we need inside ourselves in order to heal ourselves. And we just need that mirror, that reminder in front of us to kind of filter out all the noise that we've developed over our lifetimes through all of our trauma and our just all of our experiences over a lifetime. So it puts that mirror up to show you, no, you have inside what you need in order to heal, whether it's through mental health or physical health. So.
And the last thing I might add to this is we sometimes get questions like, am I going to be on this forever? No, it's really up to you. The work around this is like, I eat a salad every day, and I hope to be on a salad every day forever if it's possible. It's something that's natural and organic, and it comes from nature.
But are we addicted to salad?
But am I addicted to salad?
No, it's a choice I make. And I think also this is, like we said, developing like new tools in your toolbox. And so over time, you have these tools that you don't have to depend on constantly having that mirror. You have your toolbox, but every once in a while we need a reminder. And so even in David and I, in this, since we're talking microdose setting daily, at least at the beginning, daily mini doses of this, we took this consistently for a year and a half just to see daily what would happen. And we continued to find benefits personally and as a couple in our relationship. But over time, you learn that, no, I have these tools and now I can choose when I need that reminder. And, we're not perfect. We're all humans and we need reminders here and there. So we still work with it on a consistent basis, just not every day anymore.
Yeah, I probably work with it about twice a week, 100 milligrams. That's a very small dose. That's 100 milligrams, by the way, of botanical organic mushroom, not of just pure psilocybin. 100 milligrams of pure psilocybin will rock you.
Yeah. We'll get into dosing here in just a little bit. Yeah. Oh, up next. So now to touch on microdosing versus macrodosing. So so this is the full botanical mushroom. Again, very different if you have synthetic or not doing the full botanical. So we kind of have it broken up here. Again, microdosing tends to be within the 0.5 to about 2 2 grams of psilocybin, dried psilocybin full botanical mushroom. And in this stage at a microdosing, we're not looking for that high feeling. We're looking more for a sub-perceptual, sub-threshold experience where it's helping decouple from our thoughts on a very quiet level. We're still able to engage and go upon our day as we normally do. There's no restrictions typically at this type of dosage. We often find even your efficiency tends to go up. So whether it's in a professional setting or a personal setting or being a parent or whatever that looks like, we tend to find that you're even more engaged, more present, because that noise does kind of silence and we're able, like we said, to decouple from our thoughts. So again, looking for sub-perceptual feelings. We like to call it this slow burn, where over time it's slowly peeling off layers that we don't need anymore, aren't necessary in our life. So it tends to work better the longer we work with it. Again, we're working with this. And so having these constant and continual reminders, check-ins, we like to have journaling that goes associated with microdosing. We find prompts, daily prompts helped a lot to really check in. What am I feeling? What thought process what emotions am I feeling when I get stuck? What am I really, how am I reacting to things? So it helps us create that space to pause and look. So again, that's microdosing. Now, when we get to about the 0.2 to 0.5 of a gram, then this is where we start to kind of go beyond that sub-threshold, and you might start to see and feel a little bit more of the effects that we typically think of in the stigma around psilocybin and mushrooms. So sometimes, the colors, we start to see maybe some colors, a little bit more vivid colors. Some eye visuals, whether our eyes are closed or opened. Some of our, there might be a little bit of a dream-like state. So we see distracted thought pattern, enhanced creativity really tends to show up on these levels. And then we get into our higher doses here where things can become more 3D. You can have some distorted sense of time. Time becomes very, I like to say wibbly wobbly, but there's really no sense of time anymore where 5 minutes can feel like 3 hours or 3 hours can feel like 5 minutes. And a mild hallucination effect can happen in this 2 to 3.5 grams. Then we start to get in these higher mega doses and heroic doses. And again, as we work with individuals, each person has different sensitivities. And so one dose for one person might be a completely different experience than somebody else at the same exact dose. And so it's really making sure that you work with a facilitator that really knows how to dose you properly, depending on your medications and your sensitivities and your background and trauma and your intentions. What are your intentions? Are you looking for a big reset? These bigger doses are more of a big reset. We're really putting like the paddles on the chest to really reset the body and reset our thoughts. And this is where we kind of move into more of an ego dissolution, or what some say this death of ego, this death of self, or this identity that we have of self that tends to hold us back. And if we can, like David said, create new snowfall where there's like, we have a clean slate now. What is it that I really want to call in my life? What is it that I really want to be? What is really my purpose? And to start fresh from there. So that's what we really see at these higher levels. Again, sometimes an out-of-body experience, a complete disconnect from reality, but not in a sense, especially when we protect, and we're going to talk next about set and setting, but we really protect our set and setting. That's not meant to be a scary experience. It's meant to be more of an empowering experience. When you have in a safe environment with facilitators that are there to watch over you, that can be a very loving experience and a very emotional, moving experience. We have a lot of people that beautiful tears or laughter or purges, you all call these purges, different ways of purging, of getting rid of this old ideas or things we don't need anymore to create new space. So
yeah, and I'll add a little bit on to that. In some of the studies we've been a part of, there is a difference between synthesized psilocybin and organic botanical psilocybin. And when I say organic botanical, that is fresh grown mushroom that's dried and then taken. When it comes to synthesized, you're taking out a lot of the what are called alkaloids and compounds inside of the mushroom. Now, I understand for sort of quote unquote standard dosage, what I think the government and DEA is trying to do eventually is, okay, here's a standard dosage based off of the standard process and a patent and everything like that. That's more of a profit-driven model, and no hate against that. However, it's missing some components, because what we found in our studies is there is, when you look at the gut biome, and we've done some gut biome tests around this, there is over 3,000 species of bacteria within the gut that total at least 2 quadrillion bacteria living in through about 17 feet of intestine. That's a lot. And what these little individual alkaloids appear to be doing that are contained inside of the mushroom is they help with flourishes and growth of specific types of bacteria. And it also, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this, psilocybin in its organic form has natural microbial and antibacterial properties too. So in many respects, it's also killing off specific bacteria within the gut too, that perhaps may not be functioning very well, because there is a whole gut, mind, brain axis interaction that's taking place. And many people would argue that the gut is the first brain. And if we're not putting the right data, information, and food into this particular brain, this gut, well, then now it's affecting this up here in our heads. So I wanted to put a little bit of clarification around that. Also, with this particular dosage chart you're seeing here, one thing that it doesn't put on here is which type of mushroom. Because there are, as I mentioned also, there are some mushrooms that have very, very low psilocybin content inside of it. So you can do a 5-gram journey and sometimes feel nothing, versus there are some mushrooms out there that are very, very potent, and you can take 2 grams of it and it'll just send you off into
similar
space
to cannabis, or even similar if you want to bring in the alcohol model. You know, they're definitely higher percentages doesn't necessarily mean more benefit. So it's making sure you're picking the specific strains that are really going to help you, and not just a high alkaloid or a high psilocybin content. And
I would add in this too, and Shelley touched on it, but going into that mental space can be very, very scary for people, because we are oftentimes scared about what the unknown is. And when something is unknown, it brings up a lot of stuff. The cynic inside of us, the fear inside of us, the the worrier, the anxiety. It is so important as we step into this next part of set and setting that this piece is discussed in detail with the client or potential patient.
And again, well, not again, but I just wanted to touch on, a model that we found helps a lot, especially for people that are new to psychedelics, that to start on a microdosing protocol for a while. So you learn to develop that relationship in a less intimidating way, in a more whisper level, and really create some trust, and then work towards more of a macro experience. And then after that, to integrate with more microdosing tends to be an overall really beautiful model for the majority of people that we work with.
Yeah, it's like slowly climbing a peak. You hit your macro, which is the peak, and then you come back down again, and you feel supported along the way.
Yeah, exactly. So again, moving on to set and setting, which we've mentioned a lot already. 2 very important components. We hear this a lot. If you have watched any of the documentaries out there, like Fantastic Fungi on Netflix or How to Change Your Mind, you're going to hear these 2 words, set and setting. And we really feel this is what sets apart using this in more of a recreational experience, or a checking out experience working with this, versus using it as a therapy. And so we're going to move into talking here about the set. Your set refers to your mental space, your mindset that you're going to use prior to a psychedelic experience. And then the setting is your environment. So whether it's preparing for journey work, macrodosing, or preparing for the day, if you're going to use a microdosing choice, then the mindset is really what is paramount to this. And it really, we find, makes such a vast difference. The more clear your mindset is, the higher your success rate is going to be with this. And number one that I say put at the very top is intention setting, because I like to say that psilocybin has really big ears. It really listens. And if you don't give it direction, it can be somewhat overwhelming. And that's why we hear a lot of people in the past talk about having bad trip experiences, because they didn't give it any direction. And then they go often into an environment, which we're going to touch about environment next, where there's, whether it's, they're using it for partying, to go to a club and then mix it with with alcohol. So your setting is overwhelming and your mindset is not clear. And then it's just it doesn't know what to do and it becomes a bad trip. So if we can make our intentions very clear, then it gives the direction, it gives the medicine direction. What do you want it to do for you? What is the purpose that you're using this for? And let it empower you. Again, journaling, we find that whether you're working towards a macro sit or you're working in microdosing, journaling really helps get this down on paper to really clarify and really solidify what is your goal through all of this, and to track your progress. We find it very beneficial because, especially if you're working in a microdosing regimen, that it can be such slow changes that it's helpful to go back and see, wait a second, those intentions I had early on, I've realized I've moved beyond that now, and to really notice your progress through the whole therapy. Cleansing, especially if we're going into a more of a macro journey and these higher dosage, it's really helpful to prep our physical body and our mental body for this. So the mental comes with a lot of intention setting, and we tend to help our clients really solidify and really make their intentions clear, but also to prepare our bodies. So prepare our bodies through many different ways, whether it's changing our sleep patterns and really working towards having a consistent amount of sleep each night, a lot of hydration, a lot of water, and then also our diets, because we want to create a very clean vessel. The more clean our vessel can be, the better the uptake of this medicine will be in our body. So we like to really prep through diet, through a lot of fresh foods, a lot of high fiber diet, a lot of color in our diet, and and I talked about water before, and to really make sure that our body is at prime optimal, experience and situation and space and time in order to create that foundation for this macro experience. And then focused areas, again, this is more kind of also talking about our intentions, but really identifying where is it that we feel stuck? Where are our struggles? Where are our difficulties? What are the emotions? And we like to use the word emotions a lot. We can say, well, I feel stuck in my relationship with my partner. Okay, but what emotions are coming up? Is it anger? Is it lack of patience? Is it, overall, and whatever is it, as I don't feel a loving connection to them anymore. What emotions are you feeling that are making you feel stuck? And putting that into our intention. And then after that, after we identify what emotions do we feel stuck with, now let's say we were able to completely remove all of our negative emotions, whether they're anger or impatience or whatever that may be for you. And then we have a clean, empty vessel. What do we want to call in? What do we want to fill that empty vessel with? And put those emotions, now let's say their joy, their peace, their patience, whatever that may be, put those down and put that into the medicine and have that be your focus for the therapy.
And as it applies to the setting, as Shelley mentioned earlier too, so the environment in which the practice takes place in, and that makes all the difference. It really does. And I think it's important in understanding too the type of dosages we're doing. Again, being familiar with the strain that you're working with. Whenever we are working with a new strain, never tried before, always start in small doses and make time in your schedule to focus on that. Don't have a lot of calls, don't have appointments or anything like that. Just completely clear your schedule in order to be able to understand your relationship with that particular mushroom. Now, the settings that we have found work best. Clean, quiet space with low foot traffic and low external noise, because noise is going to trigger us. Noise is going to take us, if it's not, curated noise, if it's not intentional noise, like the sound of a siren going by, or, lots of people talking in the background. That can be a lot. At festivals, for instance, there are these individuals called rangers that are there. And what rangers do is, if someone's having a psychedelic trip or something like that, because it becomes too overwhelming, they take them into a safe place and sit them down away from everybody, as opposed to having them stay, in that particular space where they're overstimulated. So for therapeutic work, which is what our focus is on, a nice, clean, quiet space with low foot traffic. I find the more natural the environment, the better. Let it be a calming space. Let it be a low light space. I mean, when our lights, you can't see it right now because the screen's playing, but when our lights are off, we have very warm lighting. It's quiet.
Well,
The air is
sometimes we even
cool.
encourage eye masks to really
Mhm.
to remind yourself to go internal, especially if it's a new practice. Sometimes we want to open our eyes and look around and see, and it's really meant to go internal and to be reflective. And so to have an eye mask sometimes can be very helpful.
Mhm. Depending on the type of dosage, if it's a macro, it's best to have low lights because the light can be overstimulating. As I mentioned on one of the other slides under dosages, it sometimes stimulates what's called synesthesia. Synesthesia is basically an overload of all the senses at once. And so as a result of that, hearing becomes very distorted. Sometimes the sensations actually start to overlap with each other, where it almost, you see smells and taste colors. Our brain is very interesting that way. We've heard a whole lot of different, feedback on that. But, as it applies to, lighting, just making sure that it's dark. Boundary setting. Put your phone on airplane mode if you can. Make space in your schedule, as I already stated. Don't take calls, don't text. In fact, don't look at your phone. If you've ever done a large amount of psilocybin and tried to look at your phone, it is the weirdest looking thing.
Yeah.
Give yourself space to heal. A lot of people want to rush these practices. Healing takes time. If we know that we're going to be working with a client in a macrodose setting, then it's going to be about 6 hours that we're with an individual. And sometimes it's longer because everybody metabolizes medicine a little bit differently. So I strongly encourage that if this is a path that you want to take and work with, really make space in your schedule to allow that work to take place. Because again, healing is not a rush job. Boundary setting also, Shelley and I have done group facilitated work around this. And so in group facilitated work now, you have multiple people on medicines. And so beforehand, making sure you brief, the bathroom is here, exits are over here, but this is the container and space we're going to stay in until everybody is in a space and state of mind where they can, functionally get up and move as necessary.
And just to clarify again, real quick, in this area, now we're talking more about macro dosing. So this is mostly pertaining to larger doses. Now you can apply this set and setting to a microdosing practice where in the morning you create that space and you shut out the outside noise and you silence your phone to create your intentions for the day when you work with your microdosing. But we don't need to necessarily watch our set and setting. We can still be in a normal environment. We can go to work and it's in a smaller dosage. So this is mostly applying to when you have a larger macro dose, and we really need to be more conscious of these steps here.
Mm-hmm. We find it's helpful to set a timer. Whenever we're working one-on-one with a client, we both have our watches going. And a lot of that is because it really is like clockwork once you start to develop your own practice and methodology around it. And when you're first learning to work with medicine, I think it's great to have as an anchor. Typically in a psilocybin experience, and it depends on the dosage, but the average person peaks at about 2 to 2.5 hours. Some people we have seen are late bloomers with that. Will peak sometimes 3 hours into it, but on average, we find that most people peak at their psychedelic experience at about 2 hours and then slowly start to come down. And there's typically waves that go along with this. I like to do more of a bit of a scientific approach. When I first started with this, where it was just charting, this is when I'm starting to feel something. This is the sensations that I'm starting to feel with this dosage. Okay, now I'm starting to see some colors. And learning to do it that way, I found was helpful. Some people say it does take away from the experience, but to me, it's about safety and wanting to bring this as a safe practice to the rest of the world in communities that are like-minded. So I would rather take a little bit more of a conservative approach with it, rather than just saying, here, take this and good luck.
Right. And for us to notice, even there's a difference between David and my experience. He tends to feel the onset of this medicine earlier than I do. And there's so many different factors that can come into play. with how it's going to work in your body. And so for us to be able to chart and see that difference helps us to be able to apply that with the clients we work with. You know, there's so many different factors that come into play as we watch this peak and coming down experience.
Mm-hmm. Again, I know I mentioned low foot traffic, but when you're doing therapeutic work, avoid public spaces with larger doses. One of my teachers calls it an STD, spiritually transmitted disease. And basically what that is we start to pick up. There's a lot of woo words I'm going to use right now, and I apologize for that because I don't know any other words to necessarily say to it, but we pick up everything that's around us. And as a result of that, for whatever reason, psilocybin really opens us up to our
You're
world,
extra sensitive.
our world. You're just
like
highly
a
extra
sponge
sensitive.
Almost, yeah.
So avoid public spaces if you can with larger doses. Smaller doses, work and figure out which type of dosage works for you best, and you can go from there. We find the use of ambient relaxing music, preferably without words or too much familiarity, is helpful in helping to keep the mind quiet. When we start to have words that we recognize, it can sometimes be triggering, and then those words might trigger something else and trigger something else and trigger something else. And it can sometimes pull us away from that intentional work that we're trying to do. So if you're making a playlist, please be very intentional about it. I have some up on my Spotify, so if you'd like that later on for you to explore, feel free to explore that. And I'm happy to send you some stuff as well too. Now, the one area that we didn't really cover was potential side effects. And I just want to talk about that briefly because even though we're enthusiasts about this therapy getting out there, I do feel it's also fair to talk about side effects. Everybody can experience different types of side effects. We've seen the whole gambit because we've worked with so many people around this. Sometimes we see side effects like uncontrollable emotions. They eventually become controllable, but sometimes at the time the emotion just feels so uncontrollable, it's a release. Again, we call that a purge. Sometimes nausea.
In larger doses.
Yeah. And I will say this, there is a technique to dosing people too and how to do that. And I'll just talk about it briefly. The way that Shelley and I have preferred to work with this is to grind it up into a very fine powder. Traditionally, it's taken as just eating the mushroom in itself and just chewing on it and chewing on it and chewing on it. That can give people a very strong gag reflex. Also, what ends up happening when you chew it, it's less uniform, and so you get these chunks and bigger pieces that take longer to break down. And so timing-wise, it can last a little bit longer in your system. And so instead of a 4-hour journey, now you're on a 5, 6, 7, 8-hour journey. Just because your body has to break all that material down and absorb it into your system. So one methodology that Shelley and I like to work with is we like to use fennel and we like to use star anise. We put that into a tea. We take the finely ground up psilocybin into a powder, and then we place that powder in the tea, let it soak and seep for about 3 to 4 minutes, and then consume it.
And sometimes the body-brain connection to drinking a tea is very different than chewing something or taking a capsule, because a tea we think of like a warm, comforting cup of tea, and it kind of sets the stage for, I'm doing this nurturing for myself, I'm doing this as a gift for myself, I'm drinking this ceremonial cup of tea. And also I just wanted to touch on, he talked about this sensitivity that can happen, and sometimes we even find this a little bit in a microdosing therapy, where at the beginning sometimes it can raise a little bit of extra sensitivity or just a slight, very, very it'd be temporary anxiety, because I like to use the analogy that you're cleaning out your closet. You have a very messy closet. Our heads are so full of so many things. And at first, the process of cleaning your closet, you put it all over the floor, and then you feel like, what if this is even messier than it was before? And so it raises this feeling of like, I kind of want to go backwards. Maybe I regret what I did. But as we slowly start to sort the shedding that we're doing and make sense and choose what we want to keep, what we don't want to keep, what is serving us, what is not, then that's where we tend to get over that hump and tend to have less anxiety and less sensitivity. So we even find that sometimes in a microdosing therapy.
Other side effects that we've seen, we see this more on a large dose, but it's still rare, I find, is some people may have a little bit of diarrhea afterwards. But mainly the side effects that I think we've seen the most is like a nausea, sometimes a restlessness when a person is going through something internally and you can see that they're fighting it internally. You might see their body start to move. For me, when I was first learning to work with medicine, I would have shakes. So my body would shake sometimes uncontrollably. But what was interesting for me around that was it was just the medicine saying, here, just relax. This is a somatic reflex that's taking place. Relax into it and it will die down. That can elicit sometimes a panic reflex on somebody. But having worked with, I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I've worked with it now, but I found that it's just, okay, there's
It's
that.
a physical
but
reaction, not a
just
fear shake.
it's more of it's a body purge. It's a release. It's not something to be stressed or worried about.
And again, about the digestive thing, just remember that these can be detoxifiers. So I tend to tell people to think of it as it's doing something good. It's clearing out what is not needed. And often, again, like we said, the gut is our first brain. So if we can clear out some things that are blocking some pathways and blocking some healing and allow the medicine to detoxify things that are not needed, then we can create space for healing.
Yeah, we're going to field questions in a moment. I just had a couple supplementary things. I want to come back to this slide for questions, and we're going to take it off the PowerPoint. But resources, I'm happy to send this out, the actual PowerPoint out to everyone for you to take a look at, and you can have it for your own reference. But there is, like I said, in 2022, there was over 60 studies by the NIH that was authorized to be looked at. Chronic pain studies, alcoholism studies, depression studies, anxiety studies, eating disorder studies, PTSD studies, addiction studies, there's smoking cessation studies. There's so many different potential possibilities out there. Recently, AOC, a couple years ago, I guess it's a year and a half, AOC from New York and Dan Crenshaw just signed a bill for veterans to start working with psilocybin. Some people ask us also about pricing and where do we come up with our pricing around this stuff. So psilocybin assisted therapy, it really started its approval process up in Oregon. In fact, our friend that's on this call, I mentioned his name already, Daniel. Maybe afterwards we can talk a little bit about this, but Daniel helped to write some of these, write some of this work, but and handed it off a little bit later on because he has his own work that he's focusing on. But this is where a lot of pricing comes from, and it got standardized by the state because what they didn't want people to do was overcharge or undercharge or things like that. So they created their own standardization around dosages.
Now, again, this is not full botanicals. So there is a difference. I mean, necessarily pricing, but just to clarify, they're doing this off of synthetics.
So with that said, I'm going to stop the share here, and you can see our lovely faces again. And if you'd like to, where did it go? I hope we're still on the call.
Yeah, we're there.
Okay, great. If you'd like to, feel free to take yourself off the mic and please ask questions, and we'll do the best that we can to answer those questions to support you. And again, if we don't have the answer today, we will gladly reach out. Any questions?
I see we have some emails in here, so we'll make sure we include you and maybe start a little group chat if that's something you guys would like.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What's the reaction right now, kind of the atmosphere with big pharmaceutical companies? Is this something they see as an opportunity to get involved with, or something that they're seeing as a competitor to SSRIs and traditional medications they prescribe?
Oh, so they're definitely on the ball with this. There's multiple companies out there that are doing more of the synthetic work. There was a company, and they're still existent to this day. Their name is Groff Health. They're based out of York, Pennsylvania. And they actually have all of the, they have 3 DEA licenses to grow. You need 6 technically for it to be the full DEA suite, but
Some of them aren't necessary right now.
they have 6 DEA licenses in marijuana, and they have 3 DEA licenses for manufacturing, production, and manufacturing, dosage, and utilization.
My favorite son, Cherry.
What's that? And what it's going to look like is once a small company starts to get around $20 million or so in revenue, that's when big pharma is going to start to step in. Now, here's the issue with some of that. They have spent billions of dollars on marketing. And when you have a new product come into a line, what can sometimes happen, and Medtronic did this with a pain pump back in the day, but it bought a company because it threatened their business, and then they shelved it. They bought all the patents, they bought everything that they had, and they ended up shelving it. Now, with that said, there is enough evidence out there that I do feel, and Shelley and I feel, and our attorneys around this feel, that this is going to be something very, very big. There was a recent study that just came out that after 7 years of using SSRIs, clients became more suicidal. Mm-hmm. And these were drugs that were purported to help people. But the truth is that what really ends up happening is, okay, I'm taking this drug, and then, nothing, I'm just going along with my life, and I'm taking it to treat my symptoms, and I might be doing a little bit of cognitive behavioral therapy, but then I kind of back off of that. So now I need a little bit more drug because my body's starting to get used to it. So now my dosages is getting up. But the problem with that is that synthetics are not natural, and the body sometimes can reject synthetics. And so they end up pushing those synthetics out, or it causes issues in the stomach. We're seeing more issues around stomach cancer and stomach issues, colitis, IBS, than we ever have before. And that is related not only to our food sources, but also to the amount of pharmaceuticals that we're giving people on a regular basis. I believe it's now, I think 1 in 3 people are on a and there's no shame around this. I think we have to have an open conversation around this, but I believe it's like 1 in 3 people now are on some sort of pharmaceutical. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think it was like at least 2 out of 6 people are on an opiate on a regular basis. I mean, SSRI, we want to just, I'm sorry, I kind of got off topic there, but what's going to happen is this is going to be accepted. A pharmaceutical company is going to come in most likely first with patent and try to patent everything. So that way they have sole proprietary over it and push everybody out of the market. But the fact is that psilocybin was banned in the 1970s as a blanket ban against all drugs, and it is something that grows natural in nature. It came from nature. Why are we making something that grows natural? You cannot patent nature.
I'm going to patent that tree right there. Doesn't make sense.
Does that answer some of your question, I hope? Is that David that asked that?
Yes, it is. And yeah, that does. I'm assuming there's probably some similarities with when cannabis became legal, right? You can't patent that either.
And there's 4 companies in Canada right now that are approved. There is also a lot of smaller companies that are shipping mushrooms over the border. There's interesting logistics or legislation right now. For instance, in the state of California, what we know of, and we're still, getting more understanding around this, is that you can grow it, you can consume it, you can gift it, you just can't sell it. So what people end up doing around that is gifting it through services.
That's what we do.
So you provide a service to somebody, we happen to grow it, and we can gift it to them, and in the process provide a service to them. And
for us, that service is typically education and support, because we feel like that's the number 1 and 2 things you need as you start to work with this, is how do I understand what is it that I'm doing, what is I'm working with, and how do I have the proper support in order to move through this therapy and not feel alone. So Any other questions?
Any other questions out there?
I have a comment. Is that okay?
Please, yeah.
Cognitive behavioral therapy is great. There are some types of it that really help when you're talking about trauma and PTSD. it helps the anxiety, it can help some of the depression. It does not heal any part of PTSD. We know this, that it is just, it doesn't, but it helps. See, you can't say it doesn't help. I'm not getting into that part. You know, finding someone to help you with processing it is what really does help. And combining it with something other than antidepressants, which absolutely, if it's PTSD, you know, those specific symptoms do come back. This is going to be great, especially combining with EMDR and learning how to do that. That's my goal. There's some classes coming up in my field, so I'm looking into that.
Because again, now we're not covering up the symptoms. We're really trying to get to the root. And I like to say, are you using this to check in or check out? And often the things we lean towards, whether it's a pharmaceutical or it's some sort of addictive behavior, it's to check out. And this is teaching us to check in and really finding what is the root of whatever issue, struggle that I'm having.
I mean, I love the work that I do, and EMDR really does work, the eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. However, it is not without any stress and pain. Even though you don't go into the deep depths of the stories. So this, you know, who knows? This is a little bit more hopeful to me that these patients can heal even faster.
They work really well in conjunction. We find specifically like a microdosing therapy can work really well with just, traditional therapy. You take a microdose.
Yes, it does.
And you tend to feel more open and less and more vulnerable in a safe way to be able to access those parts of you that need to be brought to the surface.
Well, I think it helps you with the connections. So then you're more available.
Yes.
Exactly, because that's what psilocybin is all about, connectivity. If we look at the mycelium network, that's their beauty. That's what they're mostly intelligent about, is connectivity and connecting things underground, you know, to share signals with each other. And so to be able to access that in our body and create new connectivity is really where the healing is going to happen.
And you said migraines?
Yes.
Do you have anything to add about that?
So we found that it works great around migraines. I think that there is a component of psychology that's associated with a migraine headache. Of course, there is sometimes nerve damage that can cause migraines. But what we found in our helping with process clients is that migraine is a lot of thought loops, and a lot of thought loops that hasn't been, it's like a ball of yarn that has been completely messed up by a cat, and there is no full pathway. And so what we find with it is it just helps you to like dive into questions. And as you know, as a therapist, it's a lot of introspective questions, and a lot of feeling questions, and a lot of just like I say, like decoupling. What I have experienced and what I think we both have seen is that when psilocybin or the psilocybin is broken down into psilocin, it acts as just lighting everything up, which means those new pathways are now available for a patient to access where once they weren't before. And so as a result of that, you know, they can start to consider their pain or consider old memories or consider old thoughts, especially with bigger doses. Small doses seem to work great.
Especially over time or a long period of time. I mean, because we really believe that nearly everything is psychosomatic. Not that there's shame around that. Not that what you're feeling isn't real. This pain I'm feeling is not real. It's that there's something really deep in the subconscious that is connected to that, that's causing your body to react in that way. And so this helps us access those parts of our subconscious that sometimes we can't even in traditional therapy.
Well, unexplained pain is something we work with so much. So,
Yeah.
it's just, there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
Crazy. You'll go talk to your therapist.
Right,
So,
right. But we are experiencing those physical
Oh
symptoms.
yeah, you're feeling it. It's real to you.
Real. And I think sometimes that's what doctors try to tell us, like, oh, that's not real. Okay, it is real, but let's try to find what the root is. The root isn't just that your knee isn't working. There is a connection to up here that we need to be able to access and find the root.
And I find too that therapists that have worked with us, that what they find as they work with their own clients is, you know, when you're working with multiple clients all day long, it's exhausting, it's tiring. You end up sometimes taking on whatever that client's going through. It's just, you're not intentionally doing it, you're just picking it up. And what we often see is that therapists are able to put less projection on a client, because projection is still thinking. So they're able to put less projection on a client. They're able to sit through what they're having to say a little bit more, and then a clearer diagnosis can come through rather than jumping to the first diagnosis that may come up.
Your thinking and your focus clear is great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Clarity.
I can't, explain it.
And recall
Mhm.
is much stronger for sure.
Yeah, you can connect things better. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Activity.
Memory is sharper.
Yeah. Because it's really about connecting the two parts of the brain, the subconscious and more of our kind of evolved brain, and like bridging that gap where they're often disconnected, and how can we access both and bring them into a present state.
Any other questions? All
Does
right.
it help with other diagnoses? Do you know anything about tinnitus and menopause? I have patients who come in for both.
I mean, everything is basically, and it's good.
I can keep on asking. I'm
I
sorry.
know. And I would say the majority of physical ailments and even a lot of mental ailments are all based around inflammation. They're all rooted in some type of inflammation. Okay. So if we look at it that way, then yes, it can access most of those, but you have to be willing to do the work. And so you have to be willing to look at and go reflect and go inward to see those connections over time. So yes, tinnitus, hormonal, I do find it can help with hormones in the way that it kind of evens out the emotional overwhelm.
Yeah, not the hormonal part, but the emotional part that follows through. Sure. And do you guys recommend bigger doses for pain related versus?
Yeah, if they're willing to do that, and even more so.
I have clients who talk to you.
Yeah, and even if they can work with microdosing, like we said, and then work toward the macrodose and then integrate with microdose, that tends to be the overall best route to go.
Warm them up to it. Okay.
Yeah, and even if it's like, what I find too, just the power of suggestion with psilocybin is very helpful. People are more open to suggestion. Of course, I think it's also important to remember that that suggestion has to come from this space in our hearts rather than up here in our heads. But for instance, someone who may be struggling with some inflammation or an issue with chronic pain, like, okay, let's try this a little bit, and let's also maybe like shift your diet. Can we just see how that feels a little bit? Can we maybe see how maybe turning your phone off a little bit more instead of being on social media, or maybe we do a little bit of a fast on that too. What we find is that this is a multifactorial thing. Pain's usually not just one thing, but we often do a lot of distracting things because we won't want to actually deal with the course of the pain itself. Pain is temporary. Temporary is a subjective word, though, because sometimes it can last a very, very long time. And yes, I do feel sometimes it's necessary for there to also be intervention, like a surgery or things like that too. However, a lot of it, if we're meeting it up front as a precursor, we can actually help that pain before we have to go to these more invasive routes. So I always feel work with psychology first and then go into more invasive stuff if it's necessary.
And we do find if a client starts with microdosing, there is this organic motivation and desire to change habits that have not been serving and contributing to that dis-ease. So we see people that all of a sudden they want to start working out all of a sudden, and before it was overwhelming and there was no motivation, or they want to leave a bad relationship, or they want to ask for that raise at their job, because all of a sudden there's this desire to improve self organically that happens with this.
I know we're just past 4:30 here, friends, so we've taken 90 minutes of your time. If you have any more questions, please reach out. Would love to answer those questions for you. And I'm going to stop the recording.